People are strange, don't you think? They'll often say something is natural, as if that makes it beneficial. I wonder if these people ever consider, though, that what is natural for the predator is doom for the prey. That is the nature of our story tonight. It is a tale known as Perfectly Natural. By the time you have discovered this, it will be too late. Too late to save me, too late to save anyone. I've already taken the pills, and even now I can feel their effects beginning to surface. I understand this must seem dramatic, but I don't know how else to explain why I've decided to take my own life. Don't mourn me. Truth be told, I feel this is my own fault. More so, I have done this not to repent, but because I truly am a coward. More to the point, I think this is what was always planned. They're gone now. I heard them leave some time ago. I'm no longer needed. They tolerated me when I was raising them, but they're grown now. I remember how this all started. Back in Mexico, my wife, Lucy, and I were on our honeymoon. She was so beautiful, full of life and joy. I was happy too, but time changes everything. We saw him on a street corner, an ugly, dark-skinned man. His skin was unsettling because, to be blunt, it was not like any pigmentation a person would have. He looked burned, save for a snow-white beard that covered the lower half of his face. He smiled at us and showed us strange white jewelry. I didn't like them myself, but my wife seemed almost bewitched by these trinkets. They looked like some kind of ivory, but they were rough in texture. I was reminded of bones. Still, she liked them, so I agreed to buy her a necklace. The man turned our money away and said, "Sin dinero estaba destina a dorto esto haya decidido ta destinas." Neither of us understood him fully. We didn't really understand Spanish to begin with, and even still, I'm not fully sure he was actually speaking Spanish. He just pushed our money away and put the necklace in my wife's hands, bowed his head, and walked away. Our honeymoon was uneventful after that, but once we returned home, things started to happen. Looking back now, I feel so stupid. Maybe my mind really is gone. Maybe to someone thinking clearly, these things wouldn't seem like signs or warnings. I'm not even making complete sense to myself right now. Maybe these pills are making me remember things worse than they were. Regardless, the first thing that stands out was a nightmare. I saw my wife laid out on an altar, surrounded by bonfires. Smoke and shadows jumped around the setting, but they moved like creatures, skittering around playfully, avoiding the fire's light. I timidly moved forward towards the altar, and that was when I saw that hideous man again. He was dressed in a suit, clutching a dagger in his hands. I tried to yell to my wife, but the smoke from the fire rushed into my mouth. I gagged and choked, powerless to do anything when the man plunged that dagger into Lucy's stomach. He dragged the weapon down along her body, then used his hands to pull the wound open. He looked up to the black sky, chanting as smoke slithered into her body. I woke up at that point. I was hyperventilating. It felt like my body was trembling, but I was comforted to see Lucy laying sound asleep next to me. I was about to go back to sleep, but then I saw that strange amulet. It seemed perfect, there on the nightstand with moonlight shining out from a window. I felt sick looking at it. I wanted to get rid of it, but for some reason, I didn't. Several days later, Lucy and I got the good news. She was pregnant. I guess at this point I can be honest. She was a lot happier than I was. Not that I never wanted kids or anything. It was more I was afraid. Afraid I couldn't be a good father. Afraid something would go wrong. It's probably the pills talking, but looking back, I have to admit, with all the nightmare scenarios I worried about, what actually happened still got me. To the point, it is kind of funny. I mean, not to me, obviously, but I'm sure they are still laughing about it. Maybe that wasn't fair to say. The doctor said it must have happened while we were on our honeymoon. So romantic. Lucy loved it. I thought it was too romantic. It was perfect. Just the way that life doesn't happen. At least not without something making it happen that way. It's nice to know a barely describable nightmare has a flair for telling stories. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry. It was nice, honestly. I mean, Lucy gave birth to a pair of beautiful girls, Phoebe and Sierra. I thought those were weird names, but Lucy said they just popped into her head and she liked them. We laughed, we loved, we grew. Life was just fine. Nothing ever happened. We never had a car crash. There was never a flood or anything like that. Just peaceful happiness together. Though now I understand. We were anything but blessed or lucky. Protected, maybe, but not for our benefit. Something, and I do mean something, needed our lives to just go so perfect. Until it didn't anymore. Lucy, she got sick. The doctor said he'd never seen such an aggressive case of necrosis. She couldn't talk, she couldn't feed herself, anything. She was just rotting. Sometimes when she was less medicated, she would tap her finger to answer yes or no questions. And I think I was scared the most when she answered no, when I asked if she was in pain. Small mercy, I guess. Most of her nerve endings had already died, and so there was no way for her to feel the pain anymore. I wonder if that is this thing's version of kindness. But I'm jumping ahead again. Everything else about this story was so well constructed, I would hate to spoil the ending now. I didn't ask for this. No one would, and I don't think anyone deserves it. I've made peace with Lucy dying. Honestly, when we buried her, I wasn't sure how long she had actually been dead. Besides, maybe in death she's finally out of this thing's reach. Here and now, I'm just glad she wasn't suffering. At least if it was only that she didn't think she was suffering. But I have to admit, when it first happened, I didn't take the news so well. When she was alive, I had her to take care of. I had a purpose. And don't you think for a goddamn minute that I wasn't okay with that. I loved her more than any sort of physical or psychological need or want. And then she was gone. And I was alone with my daughters. But they were already in high school. They were planning colleges and jobs when the sickness started. And I hate myself for it. And you'd be right to hate me too. But I started to notice how much they looked like their mother. Her hair, her eyes, her body structure. I caught myself looking at them, bent over to put something in or out of a dishwasher or pick something up off the floor. I knew it was wrong, but there was just something inside me that noticed. It wasn't a choice I was making. Some weird part of my brain just thought it was natural. Phoebe started collecting odd pets. Mice, gerbils, anything that was foolish enough to walk into the yard. She was so caring, generous. Sarah and I didn't like them, but at this point, honestly, I didn't care anymore. Those things stayed in their cages and tanks in her room. Except for one. A rat. Now, I'm not sure how big a rat is supposed to get, but that one was too big, in my opinion. Phoebe named it Cookie, as if some kind of a cute name would change the fact it was a fucking vermin. But I remember that one, though. I'll give the little bastard that much. I knew which one of her little pets was Cookie. One night, I peeked my head into her room. That's a lie. I wasn't peeking. I was creeping in. I can't bring myself to say why, but I stopped with just my head in the doorway because I saw him. That rat was sitting on her nightstand, like it was watching over her like some damn gargoyle. Then it realized I was there. He looked right at me, and the light in the hallways caught in his eyes, reflected back this ugly red shade, and I remembered those bonfires from the dream. I backed away slowly. I was too frightened to run. I didn't want to draw attention to myself, and truth be told, I wish I could say I turned back because I stopped myself. Because I would never do that to my daughter, to anyone. But the truth is, I was just scared of the fact that somehow that rat knew what I was thinking. I bet you're okay with me taking those pills now, huh? Me too. Me too. But I wasn't finished paying for my sins yet. A few weeks later, that's when the end really came. Phoebe went missing. She was just not there one morning. Sarah didn't seem bothered by it, and she said that she must have probably just gone wandering off to play with some animal. But hours passed. I started thinking of calling the cops, but Sarah kept insisting that Phoebe was fine. It was just after sundown that I heard this thump under the floor. We didn't have a basement, but there was this kind of really big crawl space under the house. And I remember I was mad for some reason. First, Phoebe just vanishes, then one of her little friends is thumping around underneath the house. I grabbed a flashlight and decided I would go down there. And looking back, that was not my best idea. When I got down there under the house, I gagged at this weird smell. It was like soil and wet dirt. And I could hear movement down there in the shadows, squeaking and yelping as tiny little creatures scurried around each other in the dark. I yelled at them to go away, and then I heard it. No, not it. Her. She was down there in the dark with them, crawling around, with God knows what running and slithering over and around her. She hissed at me. Leave them be. I pointed my light at where the voice had come from, and, well, surprise everybody, I found Phoebe, though she didn't look like my daughter anymore. She didn't even look human. She looked like her mother. Her real mother. That thing, that whatever the hell it was that entered into my wife's body in that horrible nightmare. She was covered in what I could only assume and hope was fur, her nose pressed flat against her face, a mouth full of fangs. But it wasn't really frightening until I saw those eyes, those beautiful honey-colored eyes. That's when I knew it was her. Even with the light reflecting in them like an animal's would. Now, to be clear, this crawl space is not very big. It's maybe 3 or 4 feet deep. So you'd literally have to crawl. But what I saw, I'm still not sure how she fit down there. She had to have doubled or tripled in size. At that point, there was nothing else to do but crawl away and run back to my room. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't call the police. I couldn't go back down there and face her again. And then, because like I said, we weren't finished yet, my daughter Sierra came into my room. My room. Just keep that in mind. I didn't ask for this. Nobody would, I think. Anyway, she came into my room. And I remember every goddamn detail so well. She spoke in a voice I didn't recognize. She told me, "You must be so tired. It's been 2 decades. So long for creatures like you. You think we're monsters, but we are just the products of our nature. For whatever it may be worth, this was never just for your suffering." I thought she had to be stoned or something, but then her clothes just slid off her body, and I didn't think or question anything anymore. I grabbed her, and I did exactly what you think I did. I was lost in her arms, in her eyes. At first, it was the most wonderful feeling, but slowly, in between my eyes opening and closing, I started to see something. I started to see clearly. I saw her, that thing that had called itself my daughter for 20 years. It looked just like its sister, down there underneath the house with the rats and the bugs. Small mercy, I could only see it in quick flashes. It felt like I was being mauled, pushed, pinned. I wondered when it was going to actually kill me. I never worried about it ending. I worried more just wondering when it would end. I think I passed out because the next thing I can clearly recall, I was back in my room in my bed. Sierra was sitting on the edge, human again, by the way, with a bathrobe on. She smiled at me. I hated how genuine her smile looked, as if I was supposed to forget what I saw. Why? Why? Because she didn't rip me to shreds with talons and fangs? She said, "And all who walk upon the soil shall come to worship the sun and be lost in their nature, while below the soil the moon shall tend to that which toils there, and all the worlds will come to one final nature. Such is the will of Mother Aya." And then, as if nothing had happened, she just walked out of the room. I know they left. Both of them. They left me here because they didn't need me anymore. Showing me these things was a polite goodbye. No hard feelings and all that, you know. You use a man's wife as a means to enter the world, let him raise you for 20 years, clothe you, feed you. I guess you owe it to him to let you know what the hell you look like. I was powerless to resist them. Whether it was from fright or physical urges, something deep inside me just gave up. That's why I took those pills. I know there's no way to fight them. Hell, let's be honest here. It's not a fight. God help us if they were actually angry at us. I refused to name it up to this point. I think deep down that was my last shred of sanity, trying to deny any of this, that I would just wake up and everything would be fine. But it does have a name. They call it Aya, and there is no objecting her influence. But you know, and I think this is the pills talking, but maybe she isn't so bad after all. I mean, it wasn't personal, I guess. All Aya wants, from what I can gather, is what comes naturally to everything. I mean, hey, what's more natural than for a living thing to die? Donect itorum convenient.